I'm so sorry.
It's okay. I'm sort of used to it, but I'm also a little sad that I am having
Yeah.
to lay down. It sucks. I thought for sure. Anyway, hi everyone.
Hello. Yeah.
This is just like
Some
the
days are
greatest.
better than others. I know. I get it.
Yeah, yeah. So this is just me, very human, just with back pain. So I'm leaning
Yes.
awkwardly because can't sit up. Think of back surgeries in my future. So how are you? What is your oh, that's the Niemoller poem
Yes,
on your
yes.
yeah. And I
This
love
is my
that.
newest t-shirt. I got it for my birthday. So
Yeah, because I read the rest of the goddamn poem. Yeah, and I think we're there, like the
we are
normalcy
there.
bias is so hard.
It is. It is. All right. Are we live? We can welcome everyone in
Yeah.
to this latest CounterStory Perspective.
Yeah.
This has been my passion project for a few years now, the CounterStory Perspective, where we audit existing societal narratives by telling the truth, which our society doesn't always like.
No, they really don't.
Right. So today I've got my wonderful friend. You might know her as Your Weirdo Friend. They're my weirdo friend as well. And they are now going by their what
Just
would you
Dr.
say?
G.
Professional title? Dr.
Yeah,
G?
I guess, people didn't like to call me weirdo, and I'm like, I don't know why. I think it's funny. But so yeah, like there were numerous folks that were like, hey, like, we don't want to call you weirdo. And I'm like, fine. So Dr. G, which is what my students call me anyway. So
Yeah.
I thought, that'll do. That'll do.
In our household, weirdo is a definitely a badge of honor. We love being the
Yes.
weirdos. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And a lot of what we're talking about today is gonna like just dovetail right in with auditing existing narratives. This is something that I have worked on and written on for many years. I have worked in the nonprofit industry complex
Yeah.
for over 15 years, and I've worked for tiny grassroots organizations, and I've worked for big national level nonprofits, and each has their own flavor of mess that happens.
Mhm.
They're wonderful, obviously, necessary entities in our community. But a lot of times, many people in a community think that local nonprofits do all the work, and so why do we need to get off our butts and do the work? Because there's like a Salvation Army and there's a United Way. And so maybe we should just let those entities do the work. And there's a lot of plot holes with that plan. And the first one being, of course, personal investment in your community. So, we're
Right.
going to talk about hyper local community organizing because we're at a place in our nation where we're seeing existing societal structures failing. And we can definitely see on the horizon that when you gut giant bureaucratic federal institutions, they will crumble. And when they crumble, there are very, very real ramifications for that. One, I literally just saw a video last night of a cattle farmer, rancher, I guess is the more appropriate term, who voted for Trump 3 times. And in what we're seeing is sort of the sad classic story that is starting to form out of this. He saw his profits immediately undercut by the big Argentinian beef investment and
Yeah.
that Argentinian beef is now flooding the market, and our American cattle farmers are realizing in real time just how screwed they are, and a lot of them are definitely going to lose their ranches this year because they were already on like a hyper thin margin, and now they're starting to realize that they're probably going to need the support of their local communities more than they thought, and that they could probably be useful pitching into their local communities more than they may have thought. So that's just one small example of how we're seeing a lot of red flags and a lot of warning signs. Some of us were a little more psychic, a little more pattern oriented, and we've put these sort of big pictures together and have tried to be warning people for a while that we were going to see the erosion of some social support structures that was provided by our federal government in conjunction with, now I'm not going to sit here and say like federal agencies were providing this, but for example the USDA program that paid local farmers to grow food for local schools, which was a hyper local action that benefited literally everyone in that region, like right here in Hampton Roads. That program has been ended, which ended the support for farmers. They didn't get that money. It ended that fresh food source for local schools. So now local schools are back to packaged crap that they're feeding our kids. Um, and so right here in our hyper local area, we see where a crumbling of the federal structure caused an immediate crumbling of the social structure that existed in our community. Now, what we have to do now is get to a point where we build up those support structures so that ideally we can help support our local farmers to continue to get that fresh food back in schools, and we can reorganize that chain, but it's going to have to be at a hyper local level, from hyper local people. Like if you live here, you should be doing that work in your community directly. So when you published, it was, when did you publish this? It
The
was,
daisy chain?
yes, the
Oh,
19th of January. Yeah, when you put it up. The
yeah.
daisy chain is a way for us to do that, a way for us to hyper local get together with our communities and begin building out from the neighborhood, from the community level. Um, so tell me about this and where it came from in your big, beautiful brain.
Well, I'll tell you, it wasn't really. I have to tell. I always say this about the daisy chain that it's not my story; it's our story. So, it comes from. So I study the technical communication is one of my research areas. I like literally like had to have to publish on certain research topics. One of them, because I also teach technical and professional communication, is how do communities work together and how do they use stories not only to mobilize each other, but what are their internal communication structures, and then also what are their the unspoken human infrastructures that allow them to mobilize a lot of people together. So that's kind of what I do, and I've been reading around this stuff for about 20 years. In and around May of 2025, I realized I was going to have to re-up my community organizing skills. So I took some trainings from the International Center for Nonviolent Conflict and the Albert Einstein Institution, which has a spinoff that's like training community organizers for how do we organize in non-democracy times. And so I took a template of how to do hyper local stuff when democracy was working. And I was like, how do we like make this into a battle porcupine? Like, how do we, like,
Right.
how do we build something beautiful, but that also hardens off communities for fascism? And that really hinges upon giving back to each other at the hyper local level, the postal code level, what these abusers are trying to take away from us to break us. And you, to your point about food systems, one of the first things that authoritarians do is wreck an economy and wreck a food system. So they create poor, desperate, and sick people. And that's the reason why they've got a former heroin addict and coke snorting off of toilet seat, worm-brained asshole RFK Jr., who's also in the Epstein files. Like, whew, that's
Right.
why he's there. He's there to kill us all, and he is clearly demonstrating that. So you have to be able to give everything that they're taking away from us back to each other. And that's the sort of gist of what I've written about. And I'm in the process of interviewing people who have content expertise in around food and around medical care. And I'm rolling out sort of more detailed plans of how people can enact the daisy chain petal by petal so that they're not like, oh, you've just given me a general template, but how do I
Right.
go further?
So let's talk about the petals because I love
Mhm.
that idea. And so, full disclosure, we have started to implement the Daisy Chain project in Norfolk as we've had a significant amp up and ice activity over the past couple of weeks, and we've tried to mobilize as quickly as we can to protect our targeted community members. And we realized pretty quickly that there are tons of people here with great intention, but when you're not organized, it can just be like frenetic energy going off in a lot of different directions. And what can accidentally happen is that you harm the targeted community more. And that gets into like security issues. If you start talking about targeted communities, locations, and identities without being in a secure comms area, you can risk literally letting the people you don't want to know who the targeted community is. You can just give them the information. So that's just one small example is comms. So you have an outline for the daisies. And I modified those a little bit for us because we are so early on in the organizing process that the things that we need to focus on are so rudimentary that that is what our petals consist of in this moment. And we're organizing by ward. I wanted to show you like sort of the geographic area. So this is Norfolk. And we decided to organize by ward because
Good.
by zip code was still a little too hyper local in terms of getting enough volunteers to fill those spaces.
Yeah.
So ward like works well for us now, and hopefully like in the future we'll be able to like break out more into more hyper local. But for now, this is working for us to get with people to be a reasonable area for us to patrol. I've been doing rapid response. And when you're driving from one end of Norfolk to the other, you realize how big it is.
Yeah.
And we're constantly arriving on the scene right after ICE leaves or as they're wrapping up, and we can't document the detainment. We can't get solid
Right.
information. And so breaking up in the wards has immediately rectified the rapidness with which we can respond. It's still not ideal. There's still sometimes that we miss it, but already, so like in the last 2 weeks, we've organized to the point where, okay, we're more responsible for our wards and people are stepping up in those wards. So now we're responding faster and we're able to get more quality info. So that's like a direct example in real time of how appropriately carving up your geographic area is immediately useful for things that you have to respond rapidly to. I mean,
I
it
love that.
works.
I love that. And I love that you're using wards because, I was thinking, all right, your postal code is probably going to be too big. So look for the +4 number, and if you're in a
Yeah.
city, like you haven't even, it's sort of a thing where you have to remember that the daisy chain is a map. So Melissa's doing exactly what I would love for people to do is to take it and be like, all right, how do we make this work for our situation? So like if you were in a city and like you had this apartment complex that had like 300 residents, sweetheart, your first stop is your building, right? So it's really about
Yes.
like, so think about it that way. Like it's depending on where you're at, if it's super big, you're going to have to make it smaller. And the idea is to spread out so that like if you get your building organized, then your next step is to get some people in your apartment building to help mobilize daisy petals in the next apartment complex, et cetera, and so forth. So
Right.
that's so rad that you're using wards.
Yeah, and it works for political for really drawing awareness. We don't have a good track record here in Norfolk of a lot of people being super into and active in local governance. And
Mhm.
when you look at the purpose of this organization, it is to establish those parallel systems, but it also is to get people aware that you're organizing on a hyper local level. The entities that are going to have the most impact over your quality of life is your local governance, is your city council. So our city council has decided to throw up flock cameras and now flock drones without informing the public, without getting public
Yes.
comment or input. And only on the back end are our residents starting to realize how harmful these devices are, how much they were unaware and uninformed of the true full scope of what these things do. A lot of people, when I first talk to them about the Flock products, they think it's just another traffic cam to give tickets, and they don't understand the scope. And as soon as I tell them the full scope of it, they instantly don't want them anymore. So it's
Right.
100% an information issue. So by breaking the city up by wards, it also allows us to empower our local ward to be more informed on hyper local governance issues as well. So the ward designation were not, it wasn't my idea. It was another person in the city who said, why don't we just do it by ward? And that works so well to
Yes.
simultaneously build that local community while also building our local governance and bringing some hyper awareness to some local governance issues that have been in place for a while, but a lot of people weren't invested in them at the ward level. Like our ward representative has been in office for a long time, like maybe a little too long. We have a lot of issues in our ward that don't seem to be being addressed. And once you start focusing on your community in this way, you start eyeballing where the problem areas are in your ward, your hyper local, your Daisy area. And it makes you aware, like, hey, this person that we've continued to vote for, maybe we need to start looking at some fresh blood and some fresh energy. Because how did our ward get in this state? You know?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. Yes, and then and I would say too that while you can definitely apply the daisy chain to like a political structure, there's actually a pedal called mobilizer, which is actually about kind of trying to sort of like what are those paddles like shock paddles when someone's
yeah,
like
yeah,
flatlining. So there is a pedal that even accounts for that, and a lot of the daisy chain is about like that pre-electoral level stuff, like how can we give stuff to each other too, because sometimes I think in fascism times, I always joke that we should not look up, but not like the film Don't Look Up, but it's kind of the point. When you look up to institutions like mayors, city council members, governors, senators, institutional leaders of any kind, they're usually the least likely to recognize the harm because they're benefiting from the institutions as they are. And so
right.
in times of crises like this, they will try to protect and preserve the institution, even as it is like literally eating people. And it is bananas to behold. Bananas.
It is. Something that's happened here in Norfolk. Well, it's been happening is that we have a lot of gun crime and we have a lot of homicides every year, and our mayor owns a string of funeral homes. So I just want you to sit with that for a minute. Why would the mayor be at all compelled to lower gun crime if the victims of the gun crime are personally financing his lifestyle?
I mean, that is like, I
Isn't that
cannot
so
think
egregious?
of a more, I mean, listen, he has just said it with his whole chest, has he not? That you are disposable as a people, and then I'm just going to benefit from your deaths.
Right,
Yikes on bikes. And Lauren
right.
said, several people said defibrillator, and I appreciate you for helping me
Yes.
find that word. Yeah. So yeah, there is an aspect of the daisy chain that like called the mobilizer team that is essentially the defibrillator. That's like, hey, this thing is going on, whether it's at the city level or the state level, whatever it is, or might be the person informing you about like general strike preparations. There's a whole sort of petal of the daisy chain that talks about, it, that sort of functions as the defibrillator. So anyway.
Yeah. So I wanted to get into the couple things that you and I have talked about over the
Yeah.
past couple weeks as we've been like pulling all this together here in Hampton Roads. And that is I love the idea that I saw in a separate YouTube video that I sent you, the idea of OPSEC fetishization. I'm
Yup.
awful at saying that word. Um, and so what we're seeing from successful organizers in other cities that have been occupied, particularly Minneapolis and LA and Portland, is a lot of progressive liberal leaning people will join a signal group and feel like they're really cool because they're in a top secret group, but they're still talking about the information very openly. And it's not OPSEC at all. The way that they're functionally using it is not secure really at all. They're using Signal, but putting hundreds of people into a Signal group without being vetted, so it feels secure, but it's not really secure at all. And we know that they've infiltrated Signal chats elsewhere. But if we just zoom out a little bit and look at the use of Signal and tools like that, when it comes to community organizing, like we're talking about, there's absolutely a role for secure comms when you're dealing with the targeted community. We want to protect their identity, their location, everything like that. But when you look at the other petals on our daisy, these would be the functions that 50 years ago churches played. Okay. Food drives, mutual aid, raising money for families. None of this is illegal, is unconstitutional, or is new. This is just this is just actions that previously were conducted in civic leagues and churches, and those entities aren't really carrying that full weight anymore, or they need more support in times like these than they can provide. But none of this is illegal. You don't need to be in a signal group to organize a food drive. Never before, if you wanted to have a food drive at your, school for the local food bank, you certainly wouldn't even contemplate having a signal group for that. So I wanted to talk about welcoming in the community in a warm and loving way, which is, I think, how the guy worded it. Because you don't want your community to feel like they're doing something wrong by organizing mutual aid and by organizing food and organizing these very organic human support systems.
Yes. So first of all, yes, and that's me throwing some confetti in the air. So, so one of the things that I think that people might notice if they check out the daisy chain is that at no point would I ever mention Signal, because I think that the best part is to do these things in person through house parties.
Yeah.
And if you are needing to do operational security, Signal is the least secure. It's not that it's not secure, it's just the people who need to have operational security in this moment are people who are getting hormones for trans folks, people who are getting medicine for HIV positive people now that the fucking white Christian nationalists have decided that that's not okay, people who are getting healthcare for people who are pregnant, people who are obscuring people who are targets of the regime. And all of that work needs to be done in person, off your screens. Otherwise, you're just skywriting it. Everything
Right.
else, if you want to coordinate, shit, the best thing to do is put that shit in a listserv and be like, hey, sweeties, we're meeting right here to do the food pedal. This is where we're at. We're at the YWCA. It's wheelchair accessible. Come on in. Because Signal can sometimes, and Discord can sometimes trick you into thinking that simply because you are in the group that you're actually participating. And so it's
Yeah.
actually more dangerous than just making people afraid of organizing, but it also can trick people into thinking that they are organizing when they're not.
Right, right. We had a little bit of that incident here in Norfolk, and I made the gentle suggestion that if you are in a giant signal group and your first contribution to that group is criticizing someone, you should leave, because
Mhm.
you should probably be out here doing the work before you criticize people who are doing the work.
Mhm.
So I've seen a couple of comments, like someone mentioned the organization Strike for Our Rights. And I think somebody mentioned another organization earlier up. And so I wanted to talk about that because the purpose of this, and like other organizing models, is not to reinvent the wheel and do
Right.
all the work ourselves. That's not the point. We want to loop in the existing organizations that are doing it, preferably hyper local. Like
Right.
here in our community, we have the Southeastern Food Bank. They do a tremendous job, especially with what they're given. We don't need to reinvent the wheel and make a parallel food bank. They're an existing entity that we can fold into the pedal for food, for example. And that's an existing resource that we point people to.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I mean, I think that one of the things that would be so helpful in addition to volunteering with the food bank is to help that food bank develop a plan B, because this is a sad part, but as things escalate, it is very, very common for fascists to actually target food banks and the nonprofit status of food banks. So having a break glass in case of emergency dispersal of food bank resources is really
Yes.
important. I mean, alongside of stuff like growing whole foods in the neighborhood as well, and stuff like that, that can be, helping the food bank, access. Yeah, but
Right.
yeah, you're absolutely right. You don't. So I encourage people to think about the daisy chain as really a way. Okay, 1980s Transformers, you're just creating a larger robot, right?
Yeah.
You're so it's or the Care Bear stare, right? It's simply about learning to move together as a hive and a symphony, instead of like all of these scattershot organizations that are not necessarily coordinating and looping in with each other and helping each other, you know?
Right. It's
So
just looping everything together. And it's a very, if you've used project management anyway, like in any form, you can tell that it's a project management structure, but it's a flat one. It's not hierarchical.
mhm,
So
on purpose.
just full transparency, that's something that we're actually struggling with a little bit here in Norfolk because we have such a high veteran population. They aren't sure how to proceed without a hierarchy. Like we're having to sort of unlearn some behaviors that we learned, especially in the military, to rely super strictly on hierarchical structures. But we know that that's harmful in community organizing. You cannot have one person or one small group of people at the top. They're going to gatekeep, they're going to silo
Yes.
information, and if one of them gets arrested or hit by a bus, what do? You're completely out their institutional knowledge, everything. So that's something that we've had discussions about, is sharing the load in a way so we have a central library of resources. So the way I put it is, we are a garden, right? Each of our neighborhoods, our wards have a daisy. So
Mhm,
that makes Norfolk a flower garden,
mhm.
and our central library is our compost pile because it's going to feed all of our efforts. So we have to have our central compost pile that everybody throws all of their knowledge, all of their resources, throw it all in the pot. And it's also a little bit of a screening tool, because if you're not willing to share your resources for the greater good of the community, that kind of gives us an idea on how well you're going to work with community. And sometimes it's better to um, not rock the boat and let someone or some entity just keep doing their thing and percolating until they decide to join the hive.
Real, real. And I mean, I love that what you said there, and I want to lift that up again. So, for people who are worried about being infiltrated, this is the beautiful part about the daisy chain. So, it's actually it's based on a lot of things, but it is based on Gandhi's constructive program. And the thing about constructive programs is it's a really interesting way to tell if people are infiltrators or agent provocateurs, because it's an inoculation. Because if they're not willing to roll up their sleeves and help, if they're not willing to do stuff, then you can say to the person who comes into your meeting and tries to blow it up with critique, hey, I'm going to remind you of the purpose. We're here today to develop healing circle stuff. If you're not interested in that, you don't have to do that. So it's this way to reorient people towards the actions that you're doing. And it gets the agents provocateurs out because they're like, this group is not going to be one that we can rile up. And then I know that there are ICE people who have tried to infiltrate grocery delivery things, which I think is evil. Um, and if someone at the Department of Homeland Security is listening to this, fix your hearts, man, fix your hearts. Like, what the fuck? But this is what I would say there is use like the Kevin Bacon test or the Minnesota vouching, like how you vouch for
Yes.
voters, right? Like if there's not the people that you invite into your group for highly sensitive things should pass at least the Kevin Bacon test, which means somebody in your group knows that person, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Knows the neighborhood. And listen, how can we not pull Kevin Bacon into this right now? We need all
Yeah.
of the joy. So like just really,
Right.
really mobilize the Kevin Bacon test, especially for anything where you know that you're passing on community information, yeah. But I love that
Yeah.
you're
And you
about,
said
yeah,
in your first article about it, you use the word assemble the daisy. So I love that you didn't say we're planting, we're creating, we're, pulling it out of thin air. You're assembling
yeah,
everything. Yeah, that's
yeah, your
already there in
resources
your
are already there.
community. Yeah. Yeah. We have met, like I shared a video of a guy from my neighborhood who went down to Winton, North Carolina, to protest to speak at the city council meeting because they're thinking about opening a concentration camp there. We all went out in Virginia and stopped the sale of a warehouse here in
Yes,
Virginia. So they moved right across the state line to a red state, of course,
of
to
course.
Winton, which is about an hour away. And something somebody told me who used to work in DHS was like, if you can stop them from building one of these concentration camps within an hour or two of your area, you're going to have a lot less ICE activity because they're just not going to have anywhere to put people, particularly in a state where your governor or local municipalities have not agreed to work with ICE and are resisting that actively. They have
Gorgeous.
to have somewhere that's their possession, that's Department of Homeland Security property, to house people. And if you can keep that from happening, you can potentially protect your community from a real onslaught. So it's getting ahead of the game. So this guy went down, just, I wouldn't call it a speech. I would call it a cry from his soul.
I
It was,
saw that.
yes, it was incredible. And I did not know that man before we started organizing. I did not know that that man lived in my community. And that's incredible. What an asset for us to have a veteran who is passionate, who is on the right side of history. Um, and I never would have known that if I didn't simply come out to these meetings of concern. What did you call it? A pissed off potluck, right?
Yeah, man.
Right? Yeah. So like that was kind of our first meeting, was just a bunch of people that were livid and pissed off and hurt and scared. Um and that's where all of this began, was that first meeting of people that were just like, what's happening isn't sitting right with me. What are
Yeah.
we going to do about it? And that's how it started. And so when it comes to, a lot of people say, how can I get started? I have no clue. I have no clue where to get started. What would you tell them?
So I would tell them a couple of things. One, you don't necessarily have, all right, so to do the daisy chain, you only need like 3 people. And I promise you, there are 3 people in your neighborhood who are pissed off about this. And I promise you that they're already doing it. So the best thing that you can do is figure out where your energy is and then be like, all right, let me see if I can find this group of people. And if you're curious about where they are, I would recommend some places that might have information. So for instance, your independent bookstore, your UU church, your food bank, your domestic violence shelter. These are all places that already have what we're doing is building an army around things that already exist. If there's somebody who is doing food, food gardens or community gardens in your neighborhood,
Mhm.
join them, right? If there's an
Yes.
artist collective, you know, then join it. Or if there isn't, you know, meet at the library or a pub or a coffee shop and create it, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
We had a group start here, and they actually got asked to leave the coffee shop they were meeting at because they got so big and boisterous. No, it was a good
Excellent.
thing.
But
So
I
they
love
just
that though,
found
big and boisterous.
I mean, they just found a different business to go to because they outgrew the space they were in. And it's literally, they just call it doodle night. It's just doodle. There's no agenda, there's no nothing. But somehow, most of the people who started coming out to this doodle night, and it's been happening for months really, have now begun coming into the daisies and coming out to meetings and going to know your rights training. So it didn't start as a I'm recruiting community members to combat ICE. It's literally the doodle group. They don't have an agenda. You don't have to talk if you don't want to. You just show up and there's a table full of markers and paper and crayons, and you just doodle with the people that live around you. And it's so no pressure. It's so easy and accessible. But over those little sketches and doodles, they had conversations and they discovered that most of them were on the same wavelength. And now there's this robust community of people who are doing rapid response, and they're doing community organizing, and they also still get together on Wednesday nights and doodle, which is fantastic.
That makes my heart
It's-
happy. That makes my heart so happy. And I mean, I would say too, I mean, I don't know who the doodle group is, but by God, if the doodle group listens to this, one of the things that I would humbly suggest is even if you're just stapling it to a telephone pole, put your doodles out on
yes.
in the public, because it creates social proof that there are more people who care. And even if it's not like a pro-democracy thing, I mean, I love pro-democracy art in this time, but even if it's just silly, it is a sign, hey, like we're here, we see you.
Yes.
And so, especially children's art, put that shit on every public surface you can think of. Not shit, put that gold everywhere you can think of. And I love that. I'll add to your example. I know some LGBT choir groups that are in one of my hometowns that I grew up in. I don't want to like put the eye of
Yeah.
Sauron on them, but they started to get together to develop protest songs and so they're going to parade around their neighborhood. They're going to meet up and just go in a specific neighborhood with printed out lyrics on one side, and then on the other side of the paper, community groups that they want people that need help in the neighborhood. So they're teaching people a protest song by walking around, getting people to join them, and it's just this cool little ballad. And then on the other side of that lyric sheet are some different places for people to get involved. And so that's how you can build out the daisy. Each petal can feed into another.
Yeah, and you had a pedal for arts essentially.
Yes, yes, and
What's the
yes,
name of let's
it's
see.
creatives. It's the creatives, but yeah,
Creatives, yes.
yeah,
And
yeah.
and when people look at that, particularly people who come from a like old school nonprofit, every dollar counts type of mentality, they may be like, okay, but what value does that actually add? But
So much.
like you and I have both given concrete examples of how the arts can draw people into community organizing.
Yeah.
And I love that so much. And I'm going to mention it at our next meeting because we had here in Norfolk the first year of the COVID lockdowns, sometime around Christmas time. They organized something called Porchella, and they
Love
had
it.
local bands play on the front porches of people who open their home up in that way.
Mhm.
And they had a little paper map that they distributed, and you walked around to all the porches that had
Yeah.
bands playing, and it has grown every year since then. And I think the people who do Porchella would probably really love doing protest songs and getting together to do that. And that would re-engage that community, because it's been a while since COVID. And last year Porchella was a little like, is this fading out? But this would definitely give it fresh energy.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and even when there is Porchella too, so like having a community award for like the best protest song that they teach like
Yeah.
people, like just something that's like a community choice, like best protest song, I think could be really cool because I mean, I think about, when people say what good are the arts? I mean, the very first thing that I'm going to pause. So uh one of the first things that I read, aside from doing those trainings that I did, that for how do we topple authoritarianism, it was this behavioral ops book, and it says that the person who wins in a contest is not the person who has the most guns, money, or spyware, but the person who has the bigger story. Damn. And I think about how one of the first things that this regime did was get rid of PBS and Sesame Street. And there's a reason for that, because that is an enormous story of
Yes.
neighborliness and connection across diversity and a celebration of the human spirit. And that is such a huge story that fascism couldn't compete with. So our job right now is to create a bigger story, and the arts are a central vehicle for creating that bigger story. And when you like sort of re-up that arts pedal by also then advertising for other parts of the pedal that need help, by
Yes.
gosh, you've grown yourself a movement.
Yes. And we've seen, I told my kids it was coming. I said, just wait when things get bad enough. Because in our family, my kids are in a band together. My oldest son is in multiple bands. And he said a few years ago, it feels like music has gotten stale. People are remaking the same stuff. They're doing remakes rather than new stuff. And when things started getting hairy after this regime took power again, I said, well, the upside is we're going to see some great art out of this.
Yes.
And oh my gosh, now we're seeing the explosion on TikTok and Instagram of the bands and the musicians. Monrovia was on the front page of CNN today, which is bonkers because I followed that kid from when he had like 100 likes on his videos. And because Afro Appalachian music is such a niche thing, and I love that. And the fact that he's gotten to where he is because he's making accessible music about what's happening right now.
Yeah.
Like, that's so the scene is exploding. I hate that it takes fascism to make really good music again, but I mean, okay, we'll take the really good music and use it to wake people up. I know when what was his name? Zach Bryan. Was that the guy that made the ice song and
I think
made
so.
every red-blooded, patriot clutch their pearls at the lyrics of his song? And
Just
there
the
was
fake ones.
so much controversy over whether he should play that song and whether he should put it on his album, all because he spoke really earnestly and honestly about how he felt when he saw ICE taking people. Um, but
Yeah.
that song opened a lot of people's eyes that
Yeah.
were on the right, that were traditional country music listeners. It made them go, huh, maybe I should look into this more.
Right, because every song, especially in country, which has been such a vehicle for white supremacy culture, which is interesting because both bluegrass and country music began with Black American musicians.
Yeah.
So the takeover of country music is, to me, especially perverse. But country and folk, which I would love to see a re-up of, frankly, like give me some folk in this moment. But like, um,
Yes.
those genres tell a story of a nation in a way that I think specifically because genres like soul and folk and bluegrass and country music, there is still it's still evocative of a kind of call and response that then
Mhm.
allows people to sing them, that amplifies the story of a nation. And so that's why they're so threatened. That's
Yeah.
why they're so threatened by Bad Bunny. They don't want people to have access to those. And I would say to any musician who's on TikTok, that's excellent. The next step is to take that out into your neighborhood, because fascism spreads not on, I mean, it amplifies online, but it spreads in the neighborhood. And I think that some
Yeah.
people forget that. So, like, bringing it also into your neighborhood and hosting free concerts and open mic nights, um, can be extremely powerful in this moment.
Yeah. And I love that you mentioned Bad Bunny, because what he did with that Super Bowl show was not aggressive. It was not political. It was not, I mean, it was political, but it wasn't in your face, us versus you. He demonstrated joy as resistance in gorgeous form, in
Yes.
absolutely gorgeous form. Like, hey, I'm not here to fight with you. Okay. Look at this culture that we have. How could you take this culture and turn it into something for hatred and for evil? And come on, like, this is life, this is a celebration of life. I fucking love, I think he nailed the show, because there wasn't things in his show, although they tried with poor translation, they tried really hard to oh, his lyrics were explicit, which wasn't true, and oh, he people were gyrating, like, oh, what in the
People are
footloose, I
always
don't,
gyrating at the, I
at
mean,
the Super
Jesus
Bowl,
freaking
right?
Christ. Yeah. What the heck? And that's the thing, is a white supremacy culture will always, always, always find a way to rig the rules, right? To, like, pettily
Yes.
enforce some sort of moral code that they don't hold themselves to. I mean, Jesus Christ, we have a president who is raping and sex trafficking children. So I don't give a good goddamn of what comes out of the
Yeah.
executive branch or
Right.
any person saying it about the welfare of children or decency. Fuck you forever. I mean,
Right. Right. But that like the idea of joy as resistance, I've wrestled with that a lot, because I my own childhood PTSD has been triggered with Epstein, like
yeah, oh,
heavily triggered,
yeah,
and that still and probably will forever invoke in me some level of anger, and then I have
of course.
to figure out how to channel my anger appropriately and manage it, in order to produce something worthwhile out of it. Because if I just sit in my anger, I'm useless to my community. And I probably am going to begin acting out in ways that are harmful to my community. We
Real.
see people that want to be on rapid response teams, but don't inherently agree with some of the training, because they want to be more aggressive, and they want
Mhm.
to be able to be aggressive with ICE agents. And, like, we can't, no, we can't do that, because we'll give them a reason. We can't give them a reason to harm this community even more.
Right.
So the idea of instead leaning into joy, and you look at what makes men like this, because it's mostly men, what makes men like this the most angry. And in my life, when I was in the Navy, working with men who did not have their anger problems in control, what would drive them to absolutely blow their top the most is if I did not respond likewise. In fact, if I laughed, they were gone. They
Oh, I don't
blew
know.
their top. If I laughed, if I showed, like, I still have my joy, you're
Yeah.
not going to touch that, because you have problems controlling yourself. So, and I know that this has been a discussion that I've overheard this discussion when I'm with LGBT groups, and the idea that trans joy as resistance, that we are still going to have joy, and you might take and take and take from us, but you can't take joy.
Right, right. And I mean, just in case anyone is curious, every single person using the daisy chain, that emerged from me, right? I From a place of trans joy, of saying, white Christian nationalists ran me out of my home, but I'm not going to give up on my community, and I'm going to build a set of resources rooted in joy and resistance and give it to everybody. So that was
Yes.
my response to being pushed out of my home. So I mean, like joy, and I think that people like misrepresent joy. There's this really beautiful book that talks about what joy actually is, but joy isn't happiness. It's a very specific emotion where people feel the sense of euphoria and connection when they come together to do something together that they couldn't do outside of being together. Like whether it's a choir, or whether that is coming together to fix somebody's house, or whether that is like going to a protest, or moving around and delivering groceries to people who can't leave their house, and you come back and you feel this sense of hope and purpose. That's what joy is. But
Right.
we often try to obscure what joy is so that people don't seek that emotion, because it is terrifying to fascism. And I think that's why people blow their top, because um, uh, top-down authoritarian models, whether it's at the micro level or the macro level, they're so very brittle. And the moment that you build a more beautiful pattern, it collapses. And I think that that's why you see people losing their shit, when they're really, I mean, and sometimes, yeah, I mean, like we saw that with Renee Nicole Good. She said, "I'm not mad at you, dude." And it's like, oh, you are expressing a sense of sovereignty. I am going to murder you in cold blood because I can't believe that I wasn't able to. I mean, like you're speaking to a very real experience that is like deeply rooted in white supremacy culture. And I have
Yeah.
never in my life, now I'm not saying it's not possible, but like it is almost always tied to white supremacy culture and white masculinity. That does not mean that there are not derivations of that, but it is rooted in white supremacy culture. This notion that if somebody treats you poorly, that you are supposed to respond in kind or escalate so that they can justify further violence.
Right. One could even say, from some book I read once, Turn the Other Cheek. Was that, what book was that? I don't know. I feel like some people should have read that book.
Was it the Bible? Was that the,
Was it the Bible? I
you know,
feel like, yeah. So, and I love so much that you mentioned the UU churches, and our, just for anybody that's watching that does happen to be in Hampton Roads, our local UU church in Norfolk has a social justice committee that meets the third Sunday of every month.
not
And
surprised.
they are very active, and they offer lots of trainings to make sure everybody's trained, for ICE Watch and for Know Your Rights training. They're incredible people, and they've been plugged into the community for a long time. Again, they are an existing resource that we rope in to the
Right,
daisy chain so we don't have to replicate the efforts that they're already doing.
yeah,
So I would say, like, I've been thinking about my next step with my ward and like my hyper local group. And I think what I'm gonna have a pissed off potluck at my house
yes,
and have people over to the house. And that's another thing, is that our society has gotten away from those communal experiences a lot anyway. Like, um it became talked about during COVID, but I think it was pre-COVID when people became like so obsessed with having people at their house. Their house had to be perfect. If it wasn't Instagram ready, I don't know if I should have people over. And like, if you grew up in the South, didn't nobody's furniture match? Like, you drank out of, like, when you went in their kitchen to get a cup, it was like the plastic cups from the gas station were in the cabinet. Like,
red solo cups, yeah,
that's
man.
real, you know what I mean? And I think that reminding our communities that we're all the same, it's just real. Nobody's perfect. Nobody's got this whole thing on lock. Again, this goes back to the trend towards hierarchical structures because we're a veteran community. People think that there are community leaders that look like community. I don't know what the perception is, but we're all human and we're all just doing it. So we need to just jump in and do it. And I'm sure there's people that are watching that like are baffled by the fact that don't want to go to each other's houses. Probably people who are Gen X and older are like, really? That's a thing? But like, yeah, it's a very real thing. Millennials are like super sketched out about people in their house and going to people's houses. It's like a weird, if everything's not perfect thing.
Yeah,
And we have to get past that and meet
right.
people where they're at and let them meet us where we're at.
Right, right. And I agree with you. I think that there is some sort of reticence there. Um, and I'm not sure what that's about. I'm really not, but I will tell you this, the data actually shows that the more imperfect like so like you might think that inviting someone to your house and things that you think are shabby, that actually helps people drop their shoulders and breathe. Who wants to sit in a perfectly curated ass
Yeah.
house where you're not even sure if you're allowed to lean back on the goddamn cushions? I don't
Right.
want that. Like my butt would be clenched the entire damn time. And I've already got back issues. There's no way.
Yeah.
But like, so, and I mean, also, when you do those house parties, people, please make sure that you're inviting, telling people that, bring your kids and have a space for like young people to play together, because the more,
Yes.
when you do a house party, have food, have a space for children, and then have space for organizing. Anytime you do any kind of thing in your neighborhood in and around the daisy train, make sure that it does at least two things or three that kind of help fold into that daisy, like it's just. And
Yes.
then the cool thing about scaling a house party, if you're thinking, well, how would a house party be useful? The idea is that once you create a house party, you at least get one or two other people to commit to holding a house party in their own neighborhood or in their own like little street, so that it spreads that way. It's like a Tupperware party for social justice and democracy.
Yeah, we're actually having a meeting in someone else's home because they jumped to volunteer before I could, and I was like, that's fucking great. That's great. And then I can have it in my house next, and then we
Yes.
can keep moving it on and everybody gets comfortable with everybody. So, yeah, like Chris said, everybody thinks more about themselves than anyone else thinks about them. Yeah, I tell my teenagers that all the time. Like nobody's looking at you. No, trust me. People are worried about what they look like. Nobody's worried about you. Yeah.
No, no, no. And if they are watching you, they have got people who do watch you. They're sweating you because there's something about you that they wish they had. And
Yeah.
if they're that critical, they probably need a journal and a glass of water and probably a walk in the woods. Like you don't
Right.
you don't need you don't need to worry about that for sure.
Yes.
I love all these
So
people talking about their houses in
if
the.
you had one thing to tell everybody to do today, what would that be? You knew that was coming.
I didn't, but I love that that is the thing. So, I mean, I would say this, if you have not checked out the daisy chain, that would be the one thing to do. But I'm not actually, I know that this is anti-social media or antithetical to social media, but I'm more interested in you sharing it outside of the algorithm. So
Yes.
emailing it to people, texting it to people. If you want to share it in a Discord, that's totally fine. If you want to make it into zines or just post it places and whatever, I would say definitely check that out. Second, email me if you want to, or message me on Substack. If you have a group that has at least 3 people and you're working on it, I will absolutely talk to you. I've got some pro-democracy office hours, by which I mean you can just talk to me. But the other piece is this, is just say, hey, like, I would say this is just to maybe message 3 friends and be like, hey, are you like concerned about what's happening? Would you like to get together and maybe talk about this? And you can use the daisy chain if you want as an imperfect model. It's not meant to be, it's meant to be a map that you fill in. And so you could say, how could we use this? What petal could we build first? Where's your joy at? And then just go from there. So what do you think about that as a beginning advice, Melissa?
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly, especially reaching out to people you already know,
Mm,
because it makes it that much more difficult when we're meeting new people, and approaching that conversation, especially now when we don't know if the person we're talking to, especially in my area, is cool or not.
mhm.
Like, don't know if my son has talked about getting a new coworker and starting to talk to him thinking he was cool, and then like, oh, they're not cool. Uh-oh. Now I'm in a conversation I don't want to be in. But people you already know, yeah, reach out to people you already know and say, "Hey, let's get together and talk about this." And that's a great idea as usual. Everything you come up with is great
No,
ideas.
not everything. Not everything. I'm just sort of like the Babe Ruth of ideas. I just throw them out there, and when they're shitty, no one notices. So that's I'm
That's
just saying,
right.
just keep on trying. That's what I'm saying. I don't know if you know this, you know this about Babe Ruth, but he struck out more than any other person. So we remember him for his homers, but he struck out, I think, more than most athletes because I think, swung at every ball. So that's what
Oh,
I'm doing. I'm swinging at every ball.
yeah. Yeah. That's what I'm doing too. Now that
Yeah.
you put it that way, like, oh yeah, that is what's happening. All right. I just dropped in the link in the chat, the link to the daisy chain article. And now I'm dropping a link directly to our weirdo friend, because I want all of you to go subscribe to them because they are dropping stuff all the time, dropping knowledge, dropping wisdom from the community to give you. This is what I say to everybody, is that sitting there doom scrolling and taking in all the information is going to kill your brain.
Yes,
But
it is
the
designed
number
to.
one way to jumpstart your mental health is to take action. Step out and take action in
Yes.
one little way. And I promise you, it will lift you up a little bit. And then take a step and it will lift you up. And if you are prepared, you're going to be in a much better place mentally. So get on it now. Get started. Make that phone call. Call your friend and say, let's get together and talk about it. Just like I did with my friend, Dr. G.
Oh yeah, and I'm so glad that you did, and I'm really excited to see what people do.
Yes. All right. Thank you so much for everybody that tuned in today. Make sure you are subscribing to Dr. G and subscribe to Blue Ant Media that platform this conversation. That this is a conversation that not a lot of people are having out loud in the open out here, and we all need to be having it. Is how to organize our communities to sustain ourselves through this unprecedented time in American history. So, with
Yeah.
that, I will bid you all a fond farewell. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Thank you, everyone. All right. Bye.